In this series, I meet extraordinary Australians.
This is what I do. This is who I am.
It's so exciting to be here.
Who tell me their fascinating stories.
It was like someone had just given me gold.
While I paint their portrait.
I can't sleep with my bat as a kid.
My challenge is to capture their character.
That's not what you've got the power of the microphone to do.
And put it on the canvas.
I was born this colour for a reason.
The portrait is theirs to keep, so I want them to like it.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's incredible. Wow.
Oh my God.
She's hot.
Welcome to Anhs Brushed with Fame. Professor Gordian Fulde has spent 35 years at the front line of emergency medicine. As the longest-serving director of emergency in one of Australia's busiest hospitals. Passionate about the state of our nation's health, Gordian, from his front row seat, has become a leading voice against alcohol-fueled violence in our community.
Once I got this fabulous invitation, I did my homework. He is so talented, and his portraits, every last one of them, I think are just top-notch. I think I'm very lucky that anybody would take the time, let alone such a talented person like Anhs, do it.
Gordian is one of our great medical minds. He quite literally wrote the book on emergency medicine, but he's also chosen to stay right in the thick of it. I can't begin to imagine the scope of what he has seen in his long career. His face is full of character, and I'm looking forward to capturing that on the canvas today. Gordian, so great to have you on the show.
What an honour. I mean, this is unbelievably fantastic.
It's an honour for me. Take a seat.
Thank you.
This is, I have so much respect for emergency doctors, Gordian. What type of personality puts their hand up for such a job?
But it's the A-type personality. That's the ambulance people, the O people. They're people who want to get things done. If something has gone wrong badly, you want somebody there who has the knowledge, expertise, and can make a decision now.
Wow. And that's you?
I don't know, I seem to have fooled them for at least 3 decades.
Let's go right back to your childhood. Your father was a surgeon in the German army in World War II.
Yes. I'm from German background.
Yes?
And my father, he saw the horribleness of, what happens to human beings in wars, which is, we don't seem to have learnt much from there. And one of the reasons the President Fulde came to Australia is that my dad had seen what the Russian front was, and like a lot of Europe was worried that Russia was going to come over and take over Germany and things like that. And so that's how they made the brave decision to come to Australia.
And when your family arrived in Australia, your father practiced as a doctor.
Yeah, he was very lucky in that he was one of the first doctors who, after a whole lot of scrutiny and interviews, was allowed to practice as a doctor, got the licence, whereas many other immigrants ended up having to do very menial jobs where they'd been, quite talented professionals before that.
Your father had a practice overlooking Bondi Beach, is that right?
And it's still there. And what he used to do, take the 2 boys, my brother and myself, along the beach, and when a patient came, Mum would hang a white towel out of the top window, and Dad would do a U-turn, and they'd come back, and, this is the early 50s, and things so...
To treat a patient.
It was a different world.
Yeah. But being German in post-war Australia meant also encountering prejudice, something a school-aged Gordian and his brother Lothar faced for the first time.
Seeing we came to Australia after the war, there were also a lot of surviving Jewish people, but so at school we got really picked on, brought out the good side of human being too, because strangely there were a group or people would defend us. You know how in school, all boys schools, they sort of, yeah, girls still too, get up into groups. But I remember I couldn't quite work it out. And even some of the teachers hated my guts just on the basis that I was a German. When you're a young kid, you really, in a good way, probably don't understand it. And you just work around it. And in some ways, it makes you what you are.
Why did you want to become a doctor?
As a kid, I was a very severely ill asthmatic, right? So I was exposed to medicine. So I think it was a combination of things. Being sick, seeing what people did for me, doctors and nurses and all that sort of stuff.
Gordian's calling saw him studying medicine at Sydney University and training in general surgery before treading a well-worn path of surgical trainees to the UK to complete his exams. When he returned, he fell in love with medical student Leslie. In time, they would marry and have 2 daughters who'd also go on to become doctors. But in 1980, a job as a staff specialist surgeon at Sydney's Sutherland Hospital would change the course of his career. There were GPs and nurses in casualty, and if a surgeon was required, then a surgeon would come down from upstairs or somewhere else. But you kind of changed that.
The tradition used to be the last surgeon on the staff had to look after that horrible place called CAS. It was a place where you didn't want to be, it was disorganised, and it was sort of the last person out of the room had to look after it. It was totally
Chaotic.
and it really was not in the patient's interest. And I learned to look after it. I fell in love with what emergency medicine, casualty was.
So you're one of the founding fathers of creating emergency medicine as a specialty in itself, is that correct?
Absolutely.
You even wrote the emergency medicine textbook.
I wrote one of them. And it's very, very successful, but it's a small book where you can nearly have it nearby, where you can quickly make a reference and do the right thing by whatever comes to you.
As the first ever candidate to pass the new accident and emergency specialty exams, in 1983, Gordian was appointed Director of Emergency at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney's notorious red light precinct, Darlinghurst, a position he would hold for the next 3 decades.
St Vincent's asked me to come and look after the emergency department because the culture and the mission of the nuns, it was a priority. This is important, that the sick, the disadvantaged, people who, whatever done matter if they get drunk or having heart attacks, it was really important to the nuns that they get looked after. And they could see a mile away that they weren't being looked after as well as they could be. And it was tough because it was chaos. There was no structure to it.
St Vincent's is right in the middle of, there's, King's Cross, Oxford Street. There's a lot of action.
The nuns put the hospital in a really fabulous place. And so we have the stranglehold on the homeless people. We have a stranglehold on mental health, because it all seems to come into the centre of the city. And as you say, all the bad habits of mankind that you can buy or do happens around us. But at the same time, we drain the eastern suburbs, the Murdochs, the Packers, some really rich, entitled, sometimes arrogant people, right? And it's part of the game. Mm. They come in and they expect this now. They want the world's best, this, and now, for maybe something trivial. It's part of the spectrum of what you do. You got to cope with that.
How intense does it get?
It tops it. I mean, if you have a person dying in front of your eyes, I defy nearly anything more intense. And that's not just the patient, it's the relatives, the staff, and everything else. And it is it's just incredibly demanding.
I've been on the plane a few times where they say, is there a doctor on the plane? Are you that guy that sort of, yes, I am here, or do you sort of go, is there another guy? If not, I'll have to do it.
I think there's total moral duty, right? But the thing is, on the plane, there's laws. If you book as a doctor, you have to respond.
Right.
I stop at car accidents. I used to like driving at night. And I came across this really bad accident in one of the towns down south, and where a refrigerated truck and a sports car had come to bad grief. And there was gases coming from it and all the things, the headlights on, the engine was still running. This guy was in big trouble. They actually had to cut the top off the jaws of life, top of the sports car off to get the patient out. It was a big, big deal. I thought he was done and dusted. Ambulance was already there. And the ambo was there by himself. He took one look at me and he said, "Gordian, thank God you're here." Because he had worked in Paddington, right? And the guy was in a bad way, had a really bad head injury, had to call in the helicopter. They flew him to St. George, all that sort of thing. And I'm still on Christmas cards with him and his wife. He did well. Against all odds, he did well.
You once said that every doctor has a few patients that stay with them. Do you have those patients?
Of course I do. It's the patient who is still conscious, relating to you as a human being, who then dies in front of your eyes in spite of everything you can do for them. And I remember this girl who was hit by a car, crying for her mother, as a child would do. And I can absolutely replay it in my head any time. And it was sad. In some ways you could say, I haven't got over it yet, because it's the last thing you want. Nice girl. Yeah, it's just horrible.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's life. Life is also death.
How many hours would you work in a big week?
The bad old days, you know, we'd work 100-hour weeks, no problem at all, which was wrong. It was entirely wrong because your judgment, all that. Now we have rules that you can only work for the junior staff so many hours, because you're not going to make the right decision. You can't fly a plane for 3 days at a time. It's wrong.
Yeah. How do you get through it, Gordian? You know, all that intensity, how do you get through it?
I'm an armchair philosopher. I think about things, and I'm surrounded by absolutely fabulous family and fabulous dogs. And I love nature.
Gordian has come a long way since his migrant beginnings in post-war Australia, becoming not just a participant in Australian society, but a change maker. He has an innate integrity and a lovely gentleness. I want to capture these qualities. Talk to me about that period in the 80s and 90s where HIV was a really scary thing. I mean, it still is, but not
Grim
like
Reaper.
it was. The Grim Reaper ads on TV, yeah.
Basically, it was a fear of the unknown. We had this thing, and it was a killer. We had nothing against it, and we didn't really understand it. Now, thank heavens, there's control. People can expect to live with it. There's lots of medications and things like that. But there for a while, it was scary. I mean, if you did as a healthcare worker,
Yes.
and you were dealing with HIV positive people, and you got a needle stick, it's easy, lots of sharp things in the emergency departments and operating theatres, you were worried. I mean, I had a police officer who got blood on them and came all the way to St. Vincent's because he was seriously convinced he was going to die. It was that scary. And the SARS is the best example.
SARS, yeah.
Yeah? SARS is very real. You know, they got them from Canada, you know, doctors and nurses are dying, big time, from minimal contact and quickly. But that's part of medicine. Sorry, you're exposed to things you don't know, and doctors and nurses do die from bugs and diseases that they catch off their patients through no fault of their own.
The first thing I do when I get home from work is I give my kids a cuddle. Does that ever play in your mind if you've treated someone with SARS that day, you know?
Yes, but you'd wash your hands twice and things like that. So, you know, really.
What fascinates me, Gordian, is the fact that certain days of the year you're busier for different reasons.
Yes, you have professional tradesmen on Friday afternoons who've been good at their trade for a long time, getting hand injuries. And hand's one of those areas where a small injury can end up with a bad result, right? Because it's such a complex structure. It makes us what we are, human beings. And the reason they get into trouble on Friday afternoons, they want to finish the job. And so they take a chance. You know, people don't use the safety cover on a saw, on a circular saw, or whatever. They're rushing.
They want to get home.
Yes, but also they want to get the job done because they've got another job they're starting on Monday.
With the hospital located in the epicentre of Sydney's nightclub district, the greatest challenges for Gordian's emergency department are drugs, alcohol and violence. In 2012, 18-year-old Thomas Kelly is brought in because of an unprovoked attack. Can you take me back there?
How horrible is that? Everything about it, right? Because in the nutshell, you have something that should never have happened.
A stranger approached and unprovoked punched Thomas Kelly in the face. He hit the ground hard.
A young boy going out and basically, for no reason, gets punched, head injury. And that's the thing, to see somebody who then becomes brain dead and dies, and it's so young, it is like a black cloud.
Profoundly moved by the senseless death of Thomas Kelly, Gordian became a campaigner for change to alcohol and licensing laws in the hospital's local area of King's Cross. And then 4 years later, Tom's brother Stuart takes his own life.
Stuart was not in a good place. A major factor was the kickback by society that he'd given a talk supporting a change in regulations.
Australia is an alcoholic. We need to rethink the way we drink.
He wasn't a crusader or anything like that. And basically, certain elements at university and things like that made his life miserable.
It's impossibly difficult to lose one son, but then to lose two. How have they coped with it?
One would destroy most people, let alone both. I really despair at what they have gone through and still go through, and all they're trying to do now, and this thing is, we have a sort of like a saying, if we can help one patient not do it again or whatever, that's a victory. Great, right? But on the kickback and nastiness that the Kellys still experience, when they're not trying to do anything but to help it not happen again, is mind-blowing. And remember, the lockout laws came from Newcastle, where the publicans, the police, the community all got together. It's an Australian model. We don't want people totally out of control on the streets, drunk as skunks, beating up the people who are innocently going their way. So it has saved so many lives, so many head injuries, so many orbital fractures, undisputed, and it hasn't been a spillover. So yes, right? My department hasn't seen anybody die, serious head injury, and I mean, wow, isn't that what we want?
Yeah. Saving lives has been Gordian's #1 priority his whole working life. But back in 1978, when he was just a trainee, there was one precious life he knew he couldn't save. Were you there when your father passed?
Oh. Was one of the big moments of my life. A very close family, spent a lot of time with Dads, got older and things like that. We'd had long talks about life, dying, whatever, all that sort of thing. And my dad, very strict routine. and he used to go swimming Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and he was in the pool, and we knew he had an aortic aneurysm. It's the big vessel in the body which expands and then eventually will burst. And it burst, and only he and I were there. I fished him out of the pool, and I remember to this day, the ambulance officers came, and they said they had the injection with adrenaline to put into the heart. And they asked me, do you want us to do this? And having talked with Dad, and I remember so clearly saying no. And then I had to go and say to my mother, Dad's dead. That was tough. Because she'd seen us drive off. I'd gone home and picked up Dad as a routine, and Mum never got over it.
I have to tell your mum that.
I'm my mother's son.
After 35 years in the job, in March 2018, Gordian announced his retirement, making him the longest-serving director of an emergency department in Australia. Are you going to miss it?
Of course I miss it. The family, the people you work with, I really, really loved going into my department. The people you work with, you laugh, cry. It's a team because the adversity, the stress, and once I said, unless you pull together and look after each other, you can't cut it. And being such a stressful environment, a really heavy duty, sick, trauma coming all the time. And yes, I miss that intensity. But then on the other hand, people are telling me, I've been off for a couple of months now on leave, they say, I'm looking a lot better. I'm looking more relaxed. So, I mean, there's a trade-off.
How much do you think that stress taxes your own body?
Since I've stopped at St Vincent's, my blood pressure pills have gone down. My wife says I'm nicer. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh yeah, and like I said, that's you're in full bore. You know, the rev counter's in the red, yeah.
Do you ever see that as a sacrifice, or is it just that's what you do?
I see it as a sacrifice which I'm more than happy to do again.
That's very admirable. For his distinguished service to emergency medicine and as a community advocate for public health, Gordian was appointed an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2017. You've seen so much life and so much death. What is it to live a good life?
To lead a good life is very, very simple. And it's so missing, is to be nicer to the people around you and other things around you, animals, plants, all that, but to each other. We so don't do that, and it's getting worse all the time.
My mum always just says, be nice, be generous,
That's all, simple.
Be kind.
Yeah, say thank you, please.
Well, thank you for what you do.
No, I don't do anything alone.
Oh, it's been such a joy talking to you today, Gordian.
Well, I think, thank you.
I've been so entrenched in the story, I'm going to need a little while more to finish this off. So we're going to take a little break and then I'll bring you back and I'll show you the Dr. Gordian Fulde.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What an amazing experience. I feel in some ways drained because he is so good and so charming and talented. He really can get inside you. I've done a fair few interviews in my life, but I know that Anhs has the gift of drilling down to the inner sanctum.
Gordian Fulde is a unique character with a passion for helping people. He's the first to point out how lucky he has been for the love and support of his family. And he's built a long career on the back of hard work and a strong sense of making a difference in the world. I think I'm finished. I hope he likes it. Come on back, Gordian. It's been fascinating chatting to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You are so talented, and I knew before I came here you were going to dive deep into places where people normally don't get to go. But
Well,
thank you, it was terrific.
You have a lovely integrity about you and a kindness. And so I wanted to capture those two elements in the eyes. And so I want you to close your eyes now. Don't open them till I tell you. Not yet. All right, Gordian, go for it. Wow.
That's somebody else. He's much younger, good looking. No, that's fantastic. You nailed it. Thank you.
Maybe I've taken a year or two off, but you know.
Doesn't hurt.
Can you see the gravitas in the painting?
Yeah, it's serious. If I look at that, I can see myself thinking. That's cool. You're absolutely very, very talented. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
The honour's mine. Thank you. There you go. Come now. You can see yourself in there. I'm thinking, and it's a really fabulous connect. How do you describe something which is a unique experience which will stay with you the rest of your life?
Gordian Fulde has left a great legacy in Australian medicine that sees lives being saved long after he's hung up his stethoscope. What an amazing man. Next time, passionate, innovative chef Kylie Kwong on love, unimaginable loss and staying true.
He said, you know, it's Wednesday, I want you out of the house by Saturday. He said, from this moment, I disown you as my daughter.
I need to capture her energy and creative spirit and put that on the canvas.
Oh my gosh, the beauty spot. That's incredible.